What about the family members who leave the visiting rooms and can walk out of the prison? Are they really free? I appreciate our next storyteller so much because she is representing tonight some of the people who may feel forgotten in the tragedy of wrongful convictions. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Shar'Day Taylor. Shar'Day is well known in the Exoneree Network community because she is our social service advocate. And she's a fierce advocate, not only for those who have suffered from long-term incarceration, but for the family members and loved ones who've been impacted. And she's the perfect person for this role because of her own experience. She was only 3 years old when her brother, Sean Ellis, was wrongfully incarcerated. Please give Shar'Day a very warm welcome.
I am many things to many people, but most importantly, I am a twin mom to Charlotte and Rosmal. And they are the epitome of perfection and the joys of my life, truly. Recently, they've started saying these new phrases, and Charlotte's new phrase is, "I miss you, Mommy." And I really appreciate it because it helps me to realize now that we're coming upon their 3rd birthday, the space that I was in when I was 3 years old. When I was 3, my brother, Sean Ellis, was wrongfully convicted and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. One day he was there and he was loving me and protecting me and playing with me, and then one day he just wasn't. And recently, when I've been asking, why didn't anyone tell me? The answer was, because you were only 3. Recently, Netflix did a documentary on Sean's case called Trial 4. And when you watch the documentary, you get to see the outlining of his case and some pretty traumatic moments of my family's history. You also get to see little Shar'Day, who looks very much like the person that stands before you now. This round face, dimples, and beads in her hair. I wish that I could shout to this young Shar'Day and tell her, you are strong and you are not alone. I know that she didn't feel seen during those times. So when Sean came home and during his reentry process was invited to the Innocence Conference in California, he was very excited. This is an opportunity for exonerees to get together with their support people and celebrate their free but fighting status or their exonerations. And so when he asked me to be a support person, I was more than happy to do that. I was used to being a support person to someone. My life was in social work. I was a DCF social worker for a while. And I was used to supporting Sean, whether it be in faith or knocking on doors, telling his story, asking people to sign a petition to grant his 4th trial. So when he asked, I was more than willing. And plus it was California, so. We get to California and it's absolutely magical. The weather is as one could only imagine. And this was a very special time as well because Sean got to take his GPS bracelet off. And so to see the joy in his face getting in the pool, I can't even describe. But then the next day, that's when the hard work really began, right? So the exonerees go with the exonerees, and the support people go with the support people at one point in this conference, and I walk into this room. And in this room I see just a bunch of older faces. And then, but I'm kind of like the youngest one there, right? And we start going around and telling our stories. And the topic of this particular session was the difficulties support people were having with connecting with their exoneree. And I could kind of understand that a little bit. We were dealing with some things at home. See, when I was a kid, I would go with my mom to a visit to see Sean, and it typically would look like little Shar'Day with the beads, and then Sean and my mom. And so I would put my little hand in his big hand, and I would wait till it was my turn in the conversation. And whenever it was my turn in the conversation, which he always made sure there was time for me, he would give me advice about life, and he would just check in. And it was always really good. It was always just what I needed. But now he's home, and I'm a grown woman. Yeah. So I didn't need advice on how low my shirt was, or whether or not I should be wearing my seatbelt. I was grown. I just simply wanted to focus on the connection. So everyone went around, and then I look across from me and I see her. I see Alicia. Alicia, very much like me, is a young woman whose loved one was incarcerated for a crime he didn't commit. And her loved one was her father, and Sean had always been a father figure to me. And so we connected in that way. And we shared some similar experiences. So when it came my turn, I really took, it felt like all the courage I had to tell my story and just lay it all out on the line. Because we were used to, my mother and I were used to being very careful about how we addressed Sean's case or anything, because we wanted to be mindful. He still wasn't exonerated at this point. And after it was all said and done, Alicia came over and she hugged me and she thanked me for sharing, and we shared a hug that was so tight that it made me cry. And in that moment, I felt sisterhood, and I felt seen, and I felt connected. Very much different than the little girl I saw in the Netflix documentary, seeing her, that little girl, in that courtroom space. So I felt empowered enough to now go home and tell my story. And I have the pleasure of doing so now as the social service advocate for the Exoneree Network and the New England Innocence Project. I don't just tell my story for the sake of telling my story. I tell it because part of my job is to amplify the voice of the exoneree. But the other part of my passion is to amplify the voice of the support people, the family, the people that aren't often thought about when you think about how this tragedy impacts people. And so that leads me back to my dear children, Charlotte and Roz, because I see the importance of making sure that they know that their stories matter, that their life experience, no matter what's happening around them, that they will always matter, that they are seen, and that they're, most importantly, that their voice matters. Thank you.
Shar'Day is not really used to the spotlight, and I'm just so grateful for her taking it on tonight. Her voice is so important as we think about what it means to free us all. The earthquake of a wrongful conviction may strike one person in one location at one time, but the aftershocks and the reverberations extend beyond that space and time to family members, generations, crime survivors, communities, and to all of us. And I know that that's why Shar'Day devotes herself to the Exoneree Network, which is unique in how it envelops and includes individuals and their loved ones.